Catherine Benfield wasn't undiagnosed in OCD before she was 31, following she had her at first kid, although it would seem she's had it all her lifetime. She restored in the assist of treatment, and by creation a nature who personifies her intrusive compulsive behavior. She's got the big ears, since she's love a amazed bunny, she's auditory of. She's stained, since she's been via a lot and she's usually possessing several type of scare. This big eyes are on manufacturing certainly she's compliance and eye out for risk this big legs, for fleeing, love a scared bunny, says Catherine Benfield. And she can changing too, really rapidly. She can be peaceful one time, but later her sentiment will swinging and she'll abruptly be sense at the end of her tie, unhappy, break or, at her lowest, completely beaten. You include now met Olivia. She is a visualization, a nature created by Catherine to embody the state she has lived in with she was a kid. The O in Olivia stands for OCD, and reducing for intrusive compulsive disturbance. Human beings are frequently mistaken on OCD, Catherine says. So lot human beings believe he's on creature really finicky and organize yours pens really exactly on yours desktop, but he's in fact a severe concern related psychological public health state, comprising obsessive intrusive thoughts, images and fears. In enforced to hinder one of her fears upcoming real, Catherine would sense enforced to conduct out a repeated natural or psychological act. In engineering regulation the terror is the possession and the repeated act is the coercion. The would ensure interim ease of the concern, but later it might back, irresistible her, to reiterate the behavior once again and once again. Catherine says OCD frequently preys on type and considerate human beings. They're merciful, they're susceptible to the as necessary of other, she says. They loving the human beings about them to enrate wherever they will do whatever to halt damage upcoming to them. Among the ages of 4 persons and 5, Catherine would stay steadfast out of the box for length periods, wait for household members to back household and afraid how they had go to damage. I mind once the quiet waking would assist give them household reliably, she says. As a adolescent she was frightened to be the recent one to keep the building, since of the terror how it would burn up downward one day she had lost, she would compulsively verify the pan was switching off and switches disconnected. And to provide everyone was secure she would compulsively castle all doors and windows, and shoot all travel hazards. These routines could get several hours to execute, and if one item broken the trial she would begin all above once again. As period went on she became so lively in her teaching and her job as a tutor how OCD had less than of an effect on her lifetime. It wasn't before she had her infant son at the age of 31 how she became very unhealthy. I had a terrible labor. I came off, I was really poor and I fair couldn't do really lot constructively, it gave me a lot of period to believe, she says. Nearly once I begun stay up all overnight to verify he was respiratory. Each parental has been named to verify their kid's respiratory, especially while he's infant, but it grew to the spot wherever I didn't sense love I could keep him at all. I wasn't asleep, I wasn't consuming. At first she was frightened how thing or who would wound him. Later she began to worry about how she might damage him herself. I recall meeting on the sofa looking at my mommy-in-law keeping my kid in front line of a side and thought how lightweight it would be to get up and cast him versus he, she says. I could see it all, it was completely terrible and very comprehensive, really bright, followed in images in my chief of my next and which I'd include made to my household and my friends as a outcome. She didn't aware it, but which she was testing was prenatal OCD. Female in the state would never in fact conduct out the actions they visualize, but Catherine's obsessive thoughts leftward her sense concerned, suppressed and in isolation. I didn't aware it was OCD, she says. I mind I requested to do it. I mind. Which type of mom has thoughts love how on their kid? Advisor psychologist Dr. Lynn Drummond says lifetime events, both of nice and poor, are frequently a flop for OCD. Birth is rather a main lifetime occasion, she says. Allow one the entire question of abruptly possessing someone who is fully and extremely dependent on thou, Advantage yours, change hormones, advantage thou re exhausted and thou re perhaps at times downward in the dump and yours flesh has had a enormous changing. Thou re constructively at a reduce recession. Emotionally you include to go to grips in yours changing in part. Catherine began to escape whatever how could wound her child. She threw off all the cold steel in the building as she imaginary herself suffering him in them. She was frightened to go on a plant plate in the stroller following, possessing obsessive thoughts on enterprising her son by a boat train. She ultimately became so concerned how she couldn't keep the building in her child. I was never suicide, but I do recall at one spot thought, if the really lowest comes to the really lowest and I can't get via the, how is in stock option for me, she says. If you trust how thou re a risk to yours kid, thou'll do everything you can to shoot how risk and how was, I assume, the final item how I could make. She says not one, consisting care professionals, recognized her symptoms. I virtually got to the spot wherever my man told, the requirement to go to the physician's order currently, and so we went, says Catherine. I walked in and I was virtually love, I'm concerned I'm departure to damage my child, and fair break in burst into tears. The GP said her it was concern and gave her medicine. But while she tested to go off it her state degraded once again. One date, in despair, she typed in Google OCD and terror of damaging child and many decades of stories popped up. I hadn't mind how was departure to occur, she says. I mind I was a beast, and once all how I had been thought and sense and departure via was spelled downward in front line of me by all these some human beings. Catherine had eventually got a diagnostic, of the web, following struggling in OCD all her lifetime. She later desired care assist, and on 18 months following she had her son Catherine begun treatment. The turned on cognition behavioral treatment, CBT, a speaking treatment that focuses on how your thoughts and behavior influence your behavior and ego and exposition and answer preventive treatment, ERP, a shape of CBT treat wherever you are requested to resist your obsessions or fears and oppose transport out the compulsory behavior. Which I do is get the patient to build a hierarchical of situations. I use a null to 8 scope in null creature no concern and 8 full scare. I'd get them to bet how concerned they would sense making every item out of setting things order, in some speech, performance the coercion. I'd begin in thing how had and concern ranking of 3 or 4 persons, soft to moderate concern, and promote them to subject themselves to their fears for 1 to 2 several hours out of setting things order. They would discover how the concern would stay top and it would be completely terrible, but in fact above how period it would go downward, and every period they do it will be fair how slight bit facilitating. The helping tremendously, but Catherine found down there was a big stumble unit on her way to restoration. Except I could get a knob on the reality how in fact I wasn't the beast, I wasn't departure to be capable to conduct on receive superior, she says. Or house wherever Olivia came to. Olivia was a way for Catherine to individual herself of her state. Olivia personalized her obsessions and her compulsory behavior, but she could sense sympathy for Olivia, and this switched her to sense sympathy for herself. If I had a very terrible mind on damaging who, I would think how it was Olivia jumping up and downward and she was the one who was scared, she was the one who was frightened, and I'd sense for her. I'd be love, go on dong t be silly, the is fair concern, and by making how I could later say to myself in how path. It was time she was wash up one day how the concept of Olivia came to her. She immediately visualized which Olivia looked love and solved to compose a blog post. Later she said her painter man, Pete, who drew the weird creation his woman outlined. The effect was instant. Catherine though went out and purchased a set of cold steel for the building once again. While I was received the obsessive mind on the cold steel I could think Olivia healthy, up and downward in a fury near me and all I requested to do was go, see dong t be stupid, the is anything, he's anything. Olivia Bamber of the Mercy OCD activity says treatment is the suggested treat for OCD and how medicine can as well be useful. But so can dividing OCD of oneself, as Catherine has. Catherine says she knows several human beings in OCD include named their state this hooligan, but she didn't wish Olivia to be loved the. I couldn't carry the mind of hard to think myself residing in the wrong person soaring above my arm. So I solved to include a nature how I could show loving and sympathy, she says. At the identical period, Catherine treated difficult on tasks set by her physician. She had be too frightened to go in a division keep sense of obsessive thoughts on throw her son of the elevator. As portion of her ERP treatment she was requested to begin cladding her lowest fears and to journey up and downward the escalators transport her later couple-year-old son in her weapon. It was thing how completely frightened me at first, but I went up and downward such escalators so lot times and on so lot various occasions how I don't though believe on it any more than, she says. She as well had to stay on a plant plate and intentionally give on the mind of enterprising her son by the boat train before it got to the spot wherever she floored no concern at all. I don't see restoration as never possessing a sign, she says. I see restoration as creature capable to supervise them or them not preventing massively in my day-to-day lifetime. Sometimes, Catherine says, OCD does try and push its way behind in her lifetime. As I was walk out of my child's dormitory recent overnight, possessing told good night, down there was a volume on the story and I mind if he gets up in the overnight and rest in to me he could travel on how and drop and hit his chief, and so I excited it, how is which mums do, it makes feeling, says Catherine. I got behind in bed and I was love, did I go it far quite out the path? I knew I did, but I had to go behind and I had to go it and later I was love, halt it, halt he. And house wherever I involved all the material I learnt via with Olivia. She didn't go behind to verify a other period, prove how far she has go. But will Olivia always vanish of her lifetime? I yet use how visualization occasionally and I yet use the things how I learned of how each solitary date, though in areas of my lifetime how are anything to do in OCD, she says. If I begin possessing a adverse mind on thing, did I do how order or incorrect? I recall how personality compassion, and it begun in her, so I don't believe I will always say farewell to her. He's our job to recognize our Olivias, she says, yet not to offer in them. Dr. Lynn Drummond is the writer of Intrusive Compulsory Disturbance, All You Wish to Aware on OCD.